through your online presence at NHL.com. It's a very dynamic site, and I think it's safe to say that the NHL's reputation is such that it was ahead of the curve when it came to leveraging various media platforms. But I think, working for brand owners, myself, is it a challenge to achieve an integrated experience across those various media platforms, TV, internet, mobile, and radio?
Well, I think there are people who do it well. Here in the U.S., I think ESPN clearly does it well. It's the way they think about, they think about sort of the fan experience and how they want that fan experience to be consistent across all the different devices that a fan might use to consume that content. I'm sure TSN and Rogers think the same way. I think for the NHL, it's been a bit of a work in progress because we've introduced so many new initiatives, programming and media initiatives over the last couple of years, and we've also nothing, frankly. I mean, our digital initiatives I think have been great. They've sort of come right out of the box. So we've been able to work with our partners like Newline, our technology provider, to get them exactly the way that we want to get them. But a project, a big media project that is a bit of a work in progress is the NHL Network, which we see having huge potential, clearly in the U.S., where there's a need for 24/7 availability of hockey news and highlights and information. But frankly, to pick up on a point that we made, a little earlier, Eric, I think even in Canada, where there's so much coverage for the NHL, I think that I think we have permission, and I think there is an opportunity for the NHL Network to be a very important part of the sports fans' mix in Canada. And we haven't really figured that out yet, but it's something that's a priority for us.
Here with John Collins, COO of the NHL. John, just strictly from a revenue perspective, is fighting good for the game?
I think it's part of the. I don't have the experience or the gravitas on this area to weigh in. I mean, there are people like Brendan Shanahan and Coley Campbell, and obviously commissioner and deputy commissioner and GMs who I would clearly defer to. So my only point of view would be from a brand standpoint, and I think we're at a point where it's not good for the brand. Particularly right now as we're coming into the Stanley Cup playoffs and the sort of the meat of the season, most exciting time of the season to have these sort of discussions about the game in the press on almost a daily basis. There are so many other great things that are going on around the league, but I leave it to the experts to figure out where the league goes from here.
Speaking of reaching out, about 25% of NHL players are from Europe. So, and obviously, Europe, hockey in Europe is extremely popular. You have the NHL website has been translated into 7 different languages. What else have you done to connect with the European market? And specifically, I'm thinking about perhaps negotiations of different TV deals with different countries.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that whole international opportunity is really, I think, very rich for the league. It starts with the players and the connection there, and you've got all the stats, you got it right. And frankly, even more so than in North America, that is the point that the European fan connects with the league. It's through those players that they followed since they were little kids, and as they rise through their country's developmental leagues, and then unfortunately up until this year, that's also where their relationship with those players kind of ends, because we had a fairly restrictive media deal. All of our games were kind of packaged up with ESPN America throughout Europe, in all the countries where hockey is important. A hockey fan in Europe who wanted to basically see the Red Wings or Vancouver, a hockey fan in Sweden, Stockholm, who wanted to get the Red Wings games, would have to buy the ESPN 360 product, which would also include, NASCAR and Auburn football and Kentucky basketball and everything else that they were packaging up and selling. So it was a pretty big price point. And similarly, the network wasn't well distributed there. So this past year, we've broken away from that ESPN America relationship, and we've done country by country deals with the most important media companies in those markets to get the NHL prominent exposure. So, for example, in Scandinavia, where hockey is the number one sport, and the NHL is the number one brand, we'll have every game of the regular season available, and every game of the Stanley Cup playoffs available on television, national television, which is an amazing sort of turnaround. I mean, we can't even get that in Canada, frankly. But we have it in Scandinavia, and we followed that up with native language versions of NHL.com. So fans there can go as deep as they want on content related to what's happening tonight, what happened last night in the games, and what the players are doing. So that's been great, and all that content has been extended to every device, every platform that a European fan might want to consume, just like we do with our Canadian and our U.S. fans.
Well, heading back to the Western Hemisphere and still talking about television, so you were the lead on the big Comcast NHL TV deal, 10 years, $2 billion, a deal which in part I think is a bit about sampling, providing Americans, I think, with little no hockey heritage an opportunity to sample the game. But on the flip side, also every playoff game will be aired nationally, which I assume is huge for the NHL. Yeah,
as I said, I mean, the Stanley Cup playoffs are so unique, and some of the, so we do a lot of research. We just believe in it, and it gives you a good sense of what's, what your fans thinking, and gives you a sense of what's going on outside the building. And even among non-hockey fans, sports fans who don't consider themselves to be hockey fans, you would see sort of the brand equity that the Stanley Cup would have, and it's right there with the Super Bowl and the World Series and Daytona 500 and all the biggest events that you can think of on the sports calendar. Yet we didn't see the kind of that didn't translate into ratings, or at least the level ratings that we wanted to. So the first thing out of the box was try to get every game nationally televised, tell the stories of the teams and those players on the teams who are making it all happen as early as we can during the Stanley Cup playoffs, because you never know who's going to make it through to the finals. So a couple of years ago, when the Blackhawks and the Flyers were in, Philadelphia was a bit of a Cinderella team. Not one of their games in the first two rounds was nationally televised in the U.S.
When you're looking to promote off social media, Twitter and Facebook, the NHL has its own Twitter account. Does the NHL speak with teams and encourage them to have a Twitter account and a Facebook page?
Yeah, we have a digital team here that works closely with the digital group at every one of the clubs. We share, what we know and what we've learned, what our experience is, and we share best practices among the clubs. It's a pretty good laboratory for how to improve the product and connect people with the fans.
John, I'm in a lot of fantasy pools. Practically speaking, does the NHL and do leagues generally see value in fantasy sports as perhaps a way of generating a sustaining interest in a league?
Absolutely. I think when you go down the list of what fans want from a league, you talk about, obviously they want the big matchups, but then they want the highlights. Fans love fantasy. They want you see a lot of catering to that fantasy fan in almost everything we do in terms of real-time stats and highlights and everything else. And we're also taking a hard look at predictive gaming and what the opportunity is there. So sort of many people think that that's the next generation of fantasy sports.
Here with John Collins, CEO of the NHL. As we wrap things up, John, in 2003, you were appointed as the NFL Senior Vice President of Marketing, and you worked with then COO Roger Goodell. Can you just let our listeners know What is Roger Goodell like, and what does he like to work with?
Roger is he's a force in nature. He you'll never find a guy who's more passionate or loves the NFL more than Roger. He started as an intern for Pete Rozelle, I think driving him around at Super Bowls. I think his only time away from the league for his entire adult life was, I think, a season or two with the New York Jets as an intern there. So he knows the NFL very well, and he too is a visionary in terms of what he has no limitations in terms of what he thinks the NFL can achieve, which is a lot of fun and refreshing to work with someone like that.
John, why is Gary Bettman a good commissioner?
Well, like Roger, I mean, there's nobody who believes in the NHL more than Gary, and Gary has a background which he's seen it all, and he's seen it not just across the NHL, but he also had a career at the NBA at a very high level where he had the opportunity to see how the entire business kind of worked at that league and translated a lot of that, I suppose, here to the NHL, and now I think he's been commissioner for 19 years here. So, Gary, for someone who's been commissioner that long, I think every day he challenges us to do new things, to think bigger, to take risks. The story of the Winter Classic. There is no Winter Classic until the commish is satisfied that we're going to be able to do it, and he signs off on it. And so you got to give him a lot of credit for the risk taking that he's willing to do to make the game and the business better.
Sounds like Mr. Bettman has moxie. So is it fair to say then, as COO of the NHL, John, it is important to think big and dream big?
I think so. I mean, that's the fun. I mean, you're in sports because you love it, and you want to seize the opportunity to really inspire people and give them an unforgettable experience. And so, there are a couple of athletes here, guys like Brendan Shanahan. I'm not one of them. So I do the next best thing I can and try to pull off some of these big events and great experiences that get fans as excited as I can possibly get them.
As we sign off here with John Collins, CEO of the National Hockey League, John, I have to ask you just a sort of a pseudo-personal question. Who is the biggest influence in your professional life?
Well, you already hit two of them, in Gary and Roger. And I talked about the third, probably Steve Sable, who is in his own right iconic and inspiring. And, he considers himself really just a football guy and doesn't really follow any other sport. But I think so much of the sports world owes him a debt of gratitude because of the innovations that he created for football, which have translated throughout all sports, really.
John, we want to thank you for making time today to come speak with us here on Offside. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you and getting insight into the NHL and